Hey, nice to be with you all again. Welcome to Unscripted. It's a nice sunset time, but we're expecting some rain, so the light is really soft. And so we have, I'm walking my two of my four doggies. We have a class, a really, really popular class at EQUUS called the Assertiveness course. It's Assertiveness for Life and Leadership. And we work through all kinds of interpersonal dynamics and things to help people show up more authentically. And one of the frameworks that we work with is this binary called intention versus impact. Every time we teach the class, people want to slow down and talk about intention versus impact. And people want to talk to me about it all the time. So I thought I would talk to you about it today, and also because I had a little event in my neighborhood that really demonstrated the whole intention versus impact deal. So intention, impact, a binary, a complementary pair, can be a complementary pair when done well. So impact, well, let's start with intention. Intention is, somebody's intention when they do or don't do something, when they say or don't say something. Perhaps I leave a party early without saying goodbye to the host. My intention was not to interrupt, but the impact that I had on my host is that they felt, kind of like blown off, like I didn't even take the trouble to say goodbye. But my intention was certainly not to do that. And most of us, most humans, with the exception of some others, really do not intend harm to others. They don't intend to hurt or harm or betray another. But sometimes the impact we have is that it hurts, betrays, damages trust, has a negative consequence. That's the impact it has. So it's very hard sometimes to share impact. Sorry, I'm getting tangled in my dog's leash. To share impact with others, particularly if we know they didn't intend harm. But when we don't share impact, then we rob the other of an opportunity to learn about how they impact us, or how their actions impact us, or their lack of action impacts us. And in some ways, we rob people of an opportunity to know a little bit about us. And impact is a wonderful thing to share because it takes it out of who did what to whom and just says, hey, this thing that happened, this is the impact it had on me. And so we own our experience. And it takes us out of kind of any argument or defensiveness around, what did or didn't happen, because no one can argue with us about the impact we're experiencing. If my host felt ignored or rebuffed or somehow slighted by my sneaking out of the party without saying goodbye, that's a real experience for them, regardless of the intention that I had, right? So what often happens, though, is we'll share impact. We'll say, we'll take a risk, and we'll say, oh, wow, when you left the party without saying goodbye to me, yeah, I felt slighted. The impact it had on me was that I felt like, that you wanted to escape the party or that you weren't having a good time, and I felt kind of slighted and I felt confused. That's a brave move to say that to somebody. Now, what tends to happen is that the person to whom you are delivering this impact to will rush in and say, oh my gosh, well, I didn't intend to hurt you. I just wanted to slip out without disturbing anybody. Now, that may be true, but when you rush in with your intention, what you're inadvertently saying to the other person who shared impact is, what I did doesn't matter. It erases the impact I had on you. It renders it irrelevant. And it's not really an apology. Actually, it's not an apology at all. So it can often sound like, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to hurt you. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to ignore you. I'm sorry, I never intended to hurt you. That's not an apology. That's rushing in with what you intended as a way to render irrelevant the vulnerable sharing that the other person is doing. So, in a sense, impact and intention stand apart as sort of standalone experiences. You, as the person who left the party without saying goodbye to me, the host, may not have intended to hurt me or insult me in any way, but the impact nonetheless has happened. So optimally, what happens is I, the host, share, we're just using this dinner party example, will share the impact. And you will no doubt feel the sting of the impact that you inadvertently had on me. And that'll feel really uncomfortable. But you'll be with that sting and you'll just like meet me there. And it'll sound something like, oh, wow. Oh man, I can totally see why you would feel that way. Boy, that is so shitty. You know, I have this habit of kind of ducking out of things because I don't want to make anybody feel uncomfortable, and that makes it all about me. And I'm so sorry I did that to you. That party was amazing. And thank you for sharing that I had that impact on you when I did that. That was really crummy, and I won't do that in future. So I'm validating the experience, the impact. I'm not rushing in with an apology. I'm sharing how that would make perfect sense to me. And then in my apology, I'm demonstrating I won't do it again. A real apology is shown in action. The action of not doing that thing again, or not betraying that trust again, or not doing that action again. That's the real apology, is in the action. And that takes a while to show. But anyway, I'll do another video on apologies. I have a whole thing on apologies, good apologies and not good apologies, which can be really damaging. They can be even worse than no apology at all. So back to impact and intention. So next time somebody shares an impact that you've had on them, slow down, breathe. Know that, some part of your ego that identifies as a really good person who would never hurt anybody is really being rattled right now. And this isn't about you being a bad person. This is about just being human and recognizing we have impact on each other. That's what happens. And listening to the impact you've had, really getting the other person's world. There's so many opportunities to be seen and to see and to really get each other in this space of impact versus intention. So I tend to kind of have a couple of rules of thumb in this space. One is I try my best and endeavor to assume good intent. if someone's had a negative impact on me, I right away assume either there's not enough information, there's a misunderstanding, they didn't quite get the context, they thought they were taking care of me in some way or the team in some way. They weren't really clear about some agreements, but they did not mean to cause harm. That's assuming good intent. However, I don't use that assuming of good intention to silence my sharing impact. I'll share impact. In fact, assuming good intent allows me to share impact in with a lot more equanimity and less sort of shame and blame. And the other sort of rule of thumb-ish thing is that I tend to put a lot of emphasis on the sharing impact part, because that is the part that takes a lot more courage. It doesn't take that much courage to say, oh, I didn't intend to hurt you or bother you or damage trust, erode trust. That doesn't take a lot of courage. That's really more kind of, I'm just defending myself. It takes a lot more courage to share impact. So I really sort of hold a lot of honoring space for those in my life and those who I coach who have the courage to share impact. So an example of where this played out in my little neighborhood was last week. We have a neighbor who's moved to town from Texas and, has not spent a lot of time in the wilderness or doesn't really understand the rules of engagement of living in a rural community where we all look out for each other and we take care of the shared spaces between us and the natural environment that surrounds us. And he got a new toy, an ATV, a motorized four-wheel drive vehicle, one of these little sport vehicles. And in his enthusiasm to have a play, he drove it up and down the riverbed. We call them arroyos here. And arroyos are riparian areas that are fragile, and it's where the water flows when we have heavy rains. And the vegetation in the arroyos is very fragile and vulnerable, and it's important that we don't, drive over it because it slows down the water when it's flooding downhill. No doubt this new neighbor knew nothing about this. And so when I was riding and hiking in the arroyo, I saw these tracks, these ATV tracks. And, it's really frowned upon to drive motorized vehicles. It's illegal on national forests where these tracks were and wilderness areas where these tracks are. And it's illegal to drive on private property where the arroyos run between properties. So all of that's illegal. You can do what you want on your own land, but as a landowner, you would never want to do such a thing. Well, so I saw these tracks. I didn't know whose they were. We find out, the neighbors and I get together and we're concerned naturally because we think maybe folks are coming from other places and just, having some fun in these fragile, delicate areas. And we come to find out that it's this new neighbor. Well, first, everybody wanted to be, as people are prone to be, kind of conflict averse. And listen, conflict is not a four-letter word. Lots of really powerful things happen as a result of conflict. Things grow, people mend, people create new agreements. Conflict is so important. But anyway, they're like, this is our peaceful little valley. We don't want a conflict, but the conflict's already been created by someone driving their ATV through national forest, through wilderness area, and through people's backyards and their private property. So it's already here. So I gently pushed that we have a conversation and share impact, assuming positive intent. And when people don't understand the shame-free possibility of sharing intent, they get naturally defensive, and this is why people don't like to share impact. But it doesn't matter. We have to be brave anyway. So somehow I was designated the person which this new neighbor resented. It's okay. Maybe he didn't know. Maybe he didn't understand. Maybe he hadn't read the rules. Maybe he was overwhelmed with enthusiasm, as one could be when you have new land and a new toy and all this beautiful wilderness space around you. So I gently explained that the impact that he was having first was on the environment, running over the fragile plants and bushes and shrubbery that live in the riverbed, the arroyo, that has devastating consequences to that land, that it also created worry for the little community here, because we're rural and the police don't come out to us very easily, and we weren't sure whose tracks they were, and besides, how come they were all up and down everybody's private property throughout the riverbed? And that was the other impact it had. It caused people to worry. The other impact it had was that it eroded trust in this community, that he would drive across people's private land without even chatting with them about it. So it eroded trust, created suspicion, created fear, it destroyed vegetation. And the other impact that it had is that with those tracks now in the riverbed, it kind of opens the door for others. They'll see the tracks, and it just sort of attracts other motorized vehicles to come. It's sort of like bizarre belly button radar that happens. So this was the impact it had. What was his response? To get defensive, to get mean, to say, well, his intention was never to do any of that. That wasn't his intention. His intention was only to have fun. The impact that had on me and the rest of us was, wow, we can't come to you politely and just share information with you and make a request and take care of this land together. So, you know, that's when impact and intention can go south. I'm glad that I shared impact on behalf of my little community, because now he knows. And I'm sorry for my little community that he chose to be defensive and hostile. And what to say? But that won't stop me from sharing impact, especially if it's to help the collective. And just knowing, you know, sometimes that's what people do. They haven't been taught how to listen to impact, and they're going to respond that way. And it's unfortunate, but how could it have gone differently? Could have shared impact. He could have reached out to the whole community by email. We have each other's email addresses, and he could have just said, wow, I had no idea, and I won't do that anymore. Thanks for understanding. And then we would have actually felt even better than before. We would have felt even more connected, even with him and his ATV. So anyway, a little story about impact and intention. So I challenge you all to share impact. It's a scary thing to do. A lot of times it works out in a super cool way, ways you wouldn't expect, and it brings you closer to people. Sometimes it doesn't turn out so great, but you get to feel good about you, and you get to connect to yourself in a more meaningful way. And that's worth a lot. Yeah, thanks for joining me today, tonight, in this unscripted environment. Have a really beautiful day.